Welcome to the Jackrabbit Sports Hour here. Fun show ahead of us. He's Austin Senger and I'm Brent Bowen. And the Summit League tournament is right around the corner. It's March, and this is being recorded on Wednesday night, and it'll be released on Thursday. And so the Wednesday games of the Summit League tournament will be done by the time this gets recorded. We'll briefly talk about those Wednesday games, but mostly talk about the Thursday through Sunday games. But before we do that, let's talk about the games from last week for South Dakota State basketball. And we'll start with the women, who played very well last week to wrap up a third consecutive unbeaten regular season.
Yeah, two dominant performances by the women in the final two home games at First Bank & Trust Arena, especially with that St. Thomas game. They were looking great in that second half, and it just helps them be the heavy favorites for the Sioux Falls. To be in Sioux Falls.
Yeah, I thought that second half they had on Saturday against St. Thomas was one of the best halves they've played all year, at least in league play. They outscored the Tommies by like 25. It was just beautiful basketball all the way around. And it's got to get them feeling good going into the tournament, knowing that you put together one of your best and most complete halves of the year to wrap up the regular season. And not all week they played pretty well. Thursday they held Denver to just 37 points scoring, beat them by 34, and they beat St. Thomas by about 30 as well, scoring by 25 in the second half. Paige Meyer and Brooklyn Meyer were both really, really good on Saturday. It was a great way for Paige to go out in her last game at First Bank & Trust Arena. As far as a national standpoint, for the NCAA tournament, you're still projected to be around an 8-9 seed for that tournament. You're ranked in the AP Top 25 for the first time all year. As you just mentioned, they're going to be heavy favorites in the Summit League tournament in Sioux Falls. They did all this last week without Katie Vasika, their stud freshman, who is all-freshman team in the Summit League. They don't have her due to an ankle injury that she had suffered in practice. They hope to have her back here the next week. But I mean, like 63 consecutive regular season Summit League wins for the South Dakota State women after this past week's performance. It's just hard to believe what they've continued to do throughout the last few years. Yeah,
what Aaron Johnson has done with this program is just unbelievable. Like you said, 63 consecutive Summit League games in a row. That's almost unheard of. Just crazy. It's been crazy what Aaron Johnson has been able to do with the Jackrabbits.
Jackrabbit women will be the 1 seed in Sioux Falls in the Summit League tournament this week. They'll play Thursday afternoon in their first round game, and then the semifinals will be on Saturday, and the championship will be on Sunday. A bit of a different format than it is usually, when the 8-9 matchups would be on Friday, and then the quarterfinals would be Saturday. Championship would be on Tuesday. Get more preview and predictions of the Summit League tournament coming up here in just a moment. First, we'll talk about the Jackrabbit men, who had a 1-1 effort on the road this past week. Had a win at Oral Roberts on Thursday, then didn't play well on Saturday and lost at Denver. Jacks have struggled at Denver in years past, had a tough time there once again this year as the Pioneers handled the Jackrabbits on their senior day. Jacks have never played well there. I mean, even if they win on Saturday, it wouldn't have really mattered. They would have been the 3 seed anyways. The only thing it would have really done is would have just had a little bit more momentum going into the Summit League tournament. Because, I mean, you leave a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth when you lose by almost 20 points versus when you if you win or lose in a more competitive ball game. But I mean, in the end, like, you're a college basketball player. You're going to have some bad games. It's now going to be tournament time, and you just got to go wash it away and get ready for the Summit League tournament in Sioux Falls. But thoughts about how the men are looking right now going into the conference tournament in Sioux Falls?
I'm still confident in our men's team. Once you get players like Joe Seiler and Kaylin Gary going, it just makes a whole difference. You already know what Osterkluff is going to do in the tournament, but if you can get those two players to play their best game, make their shots, I think the Jacks have a good chance of making it to the championship game.
So let's preview the Summit League tournament this upcoming year. We'll just start with the 2 Wednesday games, and then we'll go through the whole men's bracket. Women's game, the games will be final by the time this gets posted. But I'm going with Omaha to beat Denver in the 8-9 women's game. And then in the 8-9 men's game, I'm going to go with Kansas City over Oral Roberts for the women's game. I think Omaha is just more consistent, a little better than Denver, even though those teams split the regular season series. Then on the men's side, I think Kansas City's playing their best basketball through the last couple weeks. I mean, they almost came to Brookings and won. Beat Denver at home last Thursday, and then they were competitive at St. Thomas to end the regular season. So, I mean, I think Kansas City's just playing a little better. They've still got a lot of upset as the preseason number 1. Then Oral Roberts is winless away from home, so I think Kansas City will handle the Golden Eagles in the 8-9 matchup to advance to the quarters. So now we'll move on and start going through the quarterfinal matchups.
So the first game for the women's is going to be number 2 Oral Roberts versus number 7 USD.
I think this one has the ability to be interesting just because you never know what Grace Larkins can do. I mean, we've seen her score 47 points in a game this season. But, I mean, it's for USD, it's going to be all about what are you going to get from those other players. Larkins is going to give you a good effort. So what can you get from the rest of your team? And I think overall, from top to bottom, Oral Roberts is just better, more talented. Really, just they do everything better than USD as far as a whole roster goes. So I think Oral Roberts will handle USD. I think it could be a game where the Oats, I don't know, they're up. You could even be up at halftime, but I think it'll be a competitive game for a half. But then Oral Roberts is going to assert their dominance and start to pull away.
And then the next game would be number 1 SDSU versus your prediction, number 8 Omaha.
I think whoever South Dakota State plays in that quarterfinal matchup on Thursday afternoon, they're going to be able to handle. I think Omaha's got some competitors. They got senior Grace Cave, who's been a good player on their program. They got the newcomer or freshman of the year in the Summit League, who's done a lot of good things for them this year. So I think they're more talented than Denver and would give South Dakota State a better game. But overall, I think South Dakota State will handle Omaha like they have twice in the regular season.
And the first game on Friday would be number 3 North Dakota State versus number 6 Kansas City.
Yeah, I think this could be very well be the most interesting matchup of the first round. These teams have a lot of history playing one another. Kansas City, a couple years ago, they were the 10 seed, beat the 7 seed back when the league had 10 teams before Western left. They were the 10 seed, upset the 7 seed, and then played 2nd seed at NDSU in the quarterfinals. And they beat them. And then they advanced to the semifinals, took on Omaha, lost to Omaha, who went to the championship to play SDSU. But Kansas City, they beat NDSU 2 years ago. Earlier this year, the Roos beat the Bison in Kansas City. So, I mean, it's a decent matchup for Kansas City to defeat NDSU. But, I mean, I thought about an upset here, but I think the Bison will prevail in a close game. I think the Bison are just more talented than Kansas City, and I think their talent in the end will get them over the hump in that quarterfinal game.
And then we have what I think is going to be a good 4 or 5 matchup for number 4 St. Thomas versus number 5 North Dakota.
Yeah, St. Thomas, they've been playing pretty well recently. They had that one bad half a few days ago against South Dakota State and Brookings. And you take away that half, and I mean, they lost to SDSU by 7 in January. Since then, they're 7-2. They had a big win at home against Oral Roberts. So they've played they've played pretty good basketball the last 6 weeks of the season. And I think overall they swept the regular season series with North Dakota. I think they're more talented, and the Tommies are just the better team. And I think St. Thomas will set up a 3rd meeting with South Dakota State.
And then on Saturday, what you have predicted is number 4 St. Thomas will take on number 1 SDSU.
Yeah, the Jacks just handled business against St. Thomas really last week. I mean, outscoring them by 25 in that second half at home. I don't think we'll see as much of a dominant performance for SDSU. I think overall, it's just there's higher stakes here in the Summit League tournament. St. Thomas wasn't really playing for much in the meeting like last week in Brookings. They were locked into the 4th seed. The Jacks weren't playing for a lot either. They had already locked up the outright title. The only thing the Jacks were playing for was to keep that unbeaten streak alive and complete their 3rd consecutive Summit League regular season, or be unbeaten in the regular season for the 3rd straight season, which they did. There will be more at stake, so this being a conference semifinals, berth in the conference championships on the line. But don't think it'll matter. I think South Dakota State will be in control for the second day in a row, or second game in a row, I should say.
And then you have North Dakota State versus Oral Roberts.
Would probably be one of the best matchups we'd get on the women's side of the tournament. Oral Roberts, the two teams split the regular season series. Oral Roberts would have swept it. They had a big fourth quarter meltdown in Fargo. That was way back in early January. It was one of the first conference games of the season. Without that big fourth quarter meltdown, Oral Roberts would have won that game, and they would have swept the regular season series, and I'd feel more confident about this pick. But I think Oral Roberts is trending more upwards than NDSU. I think NDSU has not been playing well, especially away from home, the last few weeks. And I think Oral Roberts is more talented. They're deeper, and right now they're just playing better basketball. So I think Oral Roberts will advance to the championship and set up a number 1 versus number 2 championship game.
And then, of course, in the championship, you're going to have Oral Roberts versus SDSU.
Yeah, you get the class of the Summit in South Dakota State versus another program in Oral Roberts who continues to be on the rise. Every year they just continue to get better and better and better. Aren't quite on the Jacks level yet, which is why I'm going to take South Dakota State handling the Summit League Championship. But I think Oral Roberts is getting there, and it'll be interesting to see if they possibly lose their coach sometime in the near future, because that'd be a big blow to Oral Roberts, who's continued to build up a solid program and a contender in the Summit League over the past few years. Oral Roberts is a good team. If South Dakota State's not in the Summit League, I think if the Jacks aren't in the Summit League, I think Oral Roberts easily win the Summit League, and they'd be probably a dangerous 14th seed in the NCAA tournament. But unfortunately for them, they're not. And South Dakota State continues to be the class of this league, and the Jacks will be women's basketball tournament champions for the 3rd year in a row.
And then moving on to men's basketball, the first matchup we have is going to be Omaha versus number 8 Kansas City.
I think Kansas City gets through that play-in by defeating Oral Roberts Wednesday night. Either way, I think Omaha is going to win that 8-9, but I think if you're going to ask Omaha, they would much rather prefer Oral Roberts as that first-round matchup than Omaha. It's the second year in a row where a lot of times in the Summit League, you feel very comfortable with a certain matchup, with a certain 8 seed in the first round, I should say. Last year, Oral Roberts was the 8 seed. The Jacks, that was not a comfortable matchup for SDSU. As a matter of fact, the Jacks might have been losing at halftime. Either way, I think they were losing at halftime against Oral Roberts last year in the quarters. Obviously, the Jacks pulled away and won, but I mean, there's still talent on this Oral Roberts squad. Isaac McBride is a really good player. He was the preseason player of the year. He's going to go out there and drop buckets. It's just, can the other guys contribute and make enough of a difference as well? I think Omaha is a team of destiny this year. They've had one of their best seasons ever. They handled Kansas City twice in the regular season. I think it's a solid matchup for Omaha, and I think if people had to pick an upset in this tournament, they'd probably pick Kansas City due to them being the preseason number 1 team in the Summit League, and then they still have a lot of talent on that team as well. Mm-hmm. But I think Kansas City can keep it closer than single digits, but I think Omaha in the end will prevail for a win.
The next game on Thursday is going to be number 2 St. Thomas versus Denver.
So St. Thomas swept the regular season series of this matchup. They were both pretty close games, though. I mean, it was a 3-point win for St. Thomas in the Mile High City. But that was a game Denver make an extra play or two easily could have won. And then in St. Paul, the Tommies won that game by 12. It was a close game late. It was about a 4 or 5 point game at the final media timeout. So, I mean, Denver was definitely right in striking distance. So the Pios have played the Tommies close twice. Every year in the Summit League tournament, if you think back to the last few years, there always seems to be an upset in Sioux Falls that just doesn't make much sense. I mean, Purdue-Fort Wayne, that 7-2 upset over SDSU a while back. Western Illinois is the 8th seed, took down the top seed South Dakota State the year prior to that IPFW upset. Had those. On the women's side, you had Omaha over SDSU. Most recently on the men's side, I mean, just last year, a 6 and a 7 met in the semis. Yep. 6th-seeded Omaha beat 3rd-seeded UND, 7th-seeded Denver beat 2nd-seeded Kansas City. So, I mean, upsets can happen, and I've not seen anybody else pick this upset. But I'm going to go out there and say that Denver is going to defeat St. Thomas in the Summit League quarterfinals, stun the Tommies, and advance to the semis. Big reason why, I think Isaiah Carr, his return is going to be big for Denver in this game. Denver went almost all of league play with one post, who was a true freshman who they had to pull his red shirt just so that they had a center to play, because they had 3 centers going into the year. They had Fanta Cava, who is their current starting center. They had Carr, who broke his hand early in the season, and then they had another kid from like Poland, I think, who went home early in the season because he had some things going on back at home. So he left the team, and they had 2 posts, and then Carr goes down, and they had like 1 post. So they were already thin to begin with down low, but then became really thin as the season went on. But now you get Carr back, you have 2 posts. Fantacava's really improved. I like their guards. DeAndre Craig is good, can score the basketball. Sebastian Aikens, freshman of the year in the Summer League, is very talented as well. Those guys are true competitors, and I think they're going to go out there and give it their all in Sioux Falls. And I think they've got a chance to pull off the upset. I think a bigger chance than people are giving them. They won't have Jeff Wolbrin, unfortunately for them, as Wolbrin was placed on leave. So, but in a way, that can almost motivate a team, and I think you saw that last Saturday for Denver on Senior Day. And I think their interim coach has done a good job getting those guys ready to play, and I think they can go out there and make some noise in Sioux Falls. I predicted that upset, so I obviously think that's what's going to happen.
And then the first game on Friday is going to be probably one of the best games we're going to see, and it's number 4 in the first round. Number 4 NDSU versus number 5 USD.
Yeah, very interesting matchup here. I think for me, this all depends on the health and status of Jackson Money. It's out there that Money has a kind of serious wrist injury, and if that's true and he doesn't play, I think I'm going to take USD in this matchup. I think the most interesting part about this matchup, I should take a step back here first. The most interesting part of this matchup is just the total differences in style that these two teams play, with USD's really fast pace, and then with North Dakota State's really slow pace. The Coyotes both teams can score the basketball at a high level, but it's just the different ways that they do it. USD's has one of, if not the fastest paces in the country. North Dakota State has one of the slowest paces in the country. Bison shoot a lot of threes. Money, a guy that shoots and hits a lot of threes for them. But I mean, Modi's a first-team All-Leaguer. He's getting legit NBA draft hype this offseason, and not having Modi would be big for NDSU, and that's why I think USC is going to go out there and win. And I think the Yotes are playing some of their best basketball at the right time. Yes, they just lost in Fargo to North Dakota State. They got swept by the Bison in the regular season series, but the Yotes are a good team, and it's tough to beat a good team 3 times in the same season. So I think that South Dakota will defeat North Dakota State and advance to the Summit League semifinals, and the Bison will lose in the quarterfinal round for the 2nd year in a row.
The next game, of course, is going to be number 3 SDSU versus number 6 UND.
This is a very favorable matchup for South Dakota State. Teams split the regular season series, but UND played awfully well in Grand Forks. The Jacks did not. Now, it's a little different because Owen Larson's hurt. He played in both the games against UND this season. However, the Fighting Hawks have not been very good away from Grand Forks this year. They're just like they've only won 2 games away from home this year. One of those happened in the non-con, which was actually a decent win for them at Loyola Marymount. And the other one was in like mid-January. So they won 1 conference road game. And now this will be a quote-unquote neutral site game. It'll feel like a road game for North Dakota in that Jackrabbit blue environment in Sioux Falls. And I think the Jackrabbits' weakness is going to be teams that are really athletic at the guard position. So teams like Omaha, South Dakota, and maybe even Denver possibly would really give South Dakota State problems. I think that's why South Dakota State really struggled with Kansas City a couple weeks ago, because they're really athletic at the guard position as well. Now, they did have Larson for a half, but they didn't have him in the second, and they struggled for a while. But I don't think UND, and UND still got some good guards. Like Eli King played really well. Trayson Eaglestaff is a stud. He dropped 40 against Alabama this year. Eli King had almost 30 against us earlier this year. But I think some things went UND's way in that contest back in Grand Forks in January that I don't see happening again. Like, I think the Jacks will hold Eli King more in check this time around. I don't think he's going to score 25, 30 points. They brought a guy off the bench who hit like 4 threes in the first half. He had hit 1 3 all year or something like that before the game. I don't think he's going to do that again. So I like the matchup for South Dakota State. They handled UND by 36 in Brookings. I don't expect that to happen again. I'd be surprised if the Jacks win by half that margin. But I think I like the UND matchup in the quarters more than I like Kansas City or Denver, so I'm going to pick South Dakota State.
So that will lead to, on Saturday, the first game, going to be Omaha versus USD.
Should be a fun matchup, rubber match between those two teams. A lot of rubber matches in this tournament. The way I have this thing going, I have 3 rubber matches for South Dakota State. I guess it's going to be a spoiler for who I'm going to pick here in the semifinals. I'm picking Omaha over South Dakota. It's just an Omaha team. They're a team of destiny, and they're very balanced. They have the guard play to go out there and compete with USD, because USD is going to full court press here for 40 minutes, and you've got to have enough skill at the guard position. You also have to have enough depth and athleticism at the guard position, and poise to be able to, and veteran leadership to be able to handle that. And I think Omaha has just that. Just so many weapons for them at guard. You got J.J. White, Jay-Sean Glover, Lance Waddles, Tony Osborne. You've got so many guys that can go out there and are playmakers and difference makers. And Omaha's first league loss was at South Dakota. Still, I don't think it's going to be much of a home environment for USD in Sioux Falls. There's going to be a decent amount of Coyote Red, I think more than there has been the last couple of years. But I don't think USD quite has it in them to defeat Omaha. I think it's another good close game, though, on semifinal Saturday to start the day. To start on the men's side, at least.
And then after that game, it would be number 7 Denver versus the Jacks.
Be a rematch of a game that happened a week ago, rematch of the Summit League Championship game last year when Denver made that run as a 7th seed. Jacks handled the Pioneers back in January, and Oscar Clough had a monster game, 30-19. Oscar struggled in Denver the last week, only had 4 rebounds in that contest, but I think in the Summit League tournament setting, I mean, I mentioned it earlier, SDSU always plays bad at Denver. They played bad at Denver once again this year, so that doesn't really necessarily concern me that Denver is necessarily like a kryptonite of SDSU. And I think the Jacks are able to handle the solid backcourt duo of Craig and Akins, and then the solid post now that they have with Carr and Fantakaba. I think the Jacks have an advantage. I think they even had an advantage down low with Clough. I think they had an advantage at the wing position with Seiler and Gary going up against Denver's wings. And I think South Dakota State will defeat Denver and move on to the Summit League championship game once again.
So in that championship game, of course, you're going to have Omaha versus the Jacks.
Be a rubber match between the Mavericks and the Jackrabbits. Mavericks won back in January, 7-point win for Omaha down at Baxter Arena. And Jacks didn't play their best there. It's hard to win on the road. The Jacks saw that this year. They didn't play their best on the road, even when they were able to win. But when the Mavericks came to Brookings, I mean, really, SDSU had their way. In the first half, they were going to be up by 10 or 15. Then all of a sudden, they let Omaha get right back into it for no apparent reason. It's a 4-point game at halftime. Then the Jacks all of a sudden pull away in the second half. And the Jacks just played offense at just such a high level in that game against Omaha back on February 13th. And if guys like Joe Seiler had a monster second half in that game, if it's all going to come down to SDSU's wings. If Joe Seiler and Kalen Gary are shooting the ball well, I don't see anybody that's going to beat this SDSU team. Mm-hmm. Oscar Clough, he's going to do his thing. The Larson injury does stink. I would be much more confident in my South Dakota State pick to win the men's championship if they had Owen Larson. However, I think Jaden Jackson has stepped up big towards the end of the season here, and I'm going to need good minutes out of guys like Isaac Lindsey, Stoney Hadnot. And that is the Jacks' problem, is that they aren't very deep. But I think they're deep enough and talented enough and have the best player in the league, in my opinion. Despite not him winning Player of the Year, I still think he's the best player in the league. Doesn't always necessarily mean that the best player is going to be the Player of the Year. But I think Clough is the best player in the Summit League, and I think he will will the Jackrabbits to another Summit League men's championship title. So that's our predictions, or my predictions, for the Summit League basketball tournament this upcoming year. Awards were handed out yesterday for basketball. Thoughts on Player of the Year for the men and the women?
I think for both the men and the women, I think it was 50-50. 50-50 for, Larkins and Meyer, 50-50 for Clough and Sutton. But both players of the year have done incredible things this year, and they were both very deserving of these awards.
I think what I'd be interested to hear about. So I viewed Sutton and Clough as kind of like, okay, you can really kind of give it to either guy. You wouldn't really have a wrong choice. So if you're going to go, say in theory, they made the decision was made by a lot of voters based on, okay, well, Sutton finished at the top of the Summit League standings and Clough finished at third, so we're just going to go give it to Sutton because we view them as like similar candidates. Well, then on the women's side, I thought that it was pretty close between Grace Larkins and Brooklyn Meyer, but clearly you would think that voters didn't view that, and they viewed Larkins as by far the favorite, because if it's a 50-50 discussion, then, well, I mean, Larkins finished at 7th place in the standings at 5-11, and it's not her fault, right? She did everything she could. But then Brooklyn Meyer finished at the top of the league at 16-0, unbeaten for the 3rd straight year. So, I mean, that's just my take on it. That's like, okay, then Larkins must have been by far blowing away the favorite to be the Summit League Player of the Year this year.
Yeah, I have to agree.
We'll go through some Jackrabbit awards. I mean, first team All-League, Oscar Clough on the men's side. No surprise there. The only other Jackrabbit men's basketball player to make an awards list was Kaylin Gary. He was an honorable mention this year. Some argued for Joe Seiler. Really, you were probably going to pick one or the other, I'd imagine, between those two guys. And the voters viewed Gary and put him on the honorable mention list. And then Clough was a part of the all-defensive team as well. I mean, he's just a monster on the offensive glass, or on the offensive and defensive glass, and it's just a great paint presence. Clough also the Summit League Newcomer of the Year and voted the all-newcomer team as well, the transfer from Washington State. We'll see if we get Clough back in a Jackrabbit uniform for one more year. It seems unlikely with Clough walking on senior night, and technically he has no more years of eligibility left, but with the JUCO rules, I would almost be certain gets at least one more year, maybe even two, because he spent 2 years at JUCO, 1 at Washington State, now 1 at South Dakota State. So we'll see what the NCAA decides to do there. Women's awards, Paige Meyer, Brooklyn Meyer, each first team all-leaguers. Really nothing too crazy about that there. They were both phenomenal all season. Then Haley Timmer, an honorable mention. I think Timmer's better than that. If she's playing for any other team in the league, she's probably a first team all-leaguer, but everybody's got to eat for the South Dakota State team. So, I mean, you've just got so many mouths to feed, and Timmer still talented player, both ends of the floor, able to find her way onto the honorable mention list. There were 3 Jacks on the all-defensive team. I mean, they were the best defensive team in the Summit. Paige Meyer, Brooklyn Meyer, Mesa Byam, all big reasons why. Byam's going to be a big loss for South Dakota State next year. Very underrated player, and especially in the last couple of years she's been as a Jackrabbit. Then Katie Vasika had an excellent freshman season for SDSU. She's voted to the all-freshman team. Jacks will hope to get Vasika back and healthy here in the Summit League tournament. If she can't go in the Summit League tournament, get her back for the NCAA tournament, because the Jacks will need her if they want to make an NCAA tournament push. Then the Coach of the Year for SDSU women's basketball, Erin Johnston, won that award for the 5th consecutive season. Just continues to do so many great things. Could argue he's the best coach in South Dakota State athletics history. Any thoughts and opinions about the rest of the awards list as I read them all off?
I think all the players were well deserving of these awards and the teams that they made.
Summit League tournament, always a fun time of year. Looking to cover it. Looking forward to covering it this weekend. Obviously, it's already undergone, and the quarterfinals will start Thursday, and then championship will be on Sunday. A bit of a different format from years past when the championship game didn't take place until Tuesday. But if the Jackrabbit men keep winning, could very well have some late nights ahead of us. Anyways, let's go talk some NFL. A lot happened over the last couple of days. Just recently, I think maybe the biggest news of them all, at least star-wise, is that Max Crosby got a massive extension from the Raiders.
Yeah, I think it's a smart move, of course, for the Raiders. You got a superstar in Max Crosby with being the defensive end. I think he's still going to do very, very good things with the Raiders. He got injured, right? At the end of the season?
He might have.
I want to say he got injured. But it's good. I think it was a good idea for the Raiders to extend him.
And then some wide receivers getting released from their certain squads. We'll start with the Seahawks and what they did with their wide receiver room. Tyler Lockett getting released, and then DK Metcalf requesting a trade to a contender.
I think it was a smart move, of course, for DK. he doesn't view as the Seahawks being a contender in the next couple years of his prime. So I think it was the best move for him to try to go get a ring.
And then Tyler Lockett, he's getting older and older, had some great years when Russell Wilson was the quarterback at the Seahawks, has kind of lost a step over the last couple of years as the wide receiver 3. Seahawks still do have Jackson Smith and Jigba around. We'll likely see them sign a free agent at receiver, maybe draft another one as well. Still got Kenneth Walker around, so there's still some weapons. But I think, DK Metcalf views he's got 3 more really solid. He's probably got more than 3. I bet he's got 5 to 6 solid more years in his career. But I guess maybe just doesn't think that the Seahawks are going to be serious Super Bowl contenders in the next 5 to 6 years when he's going to be really good. So he's going to try and get to a contender as soon as he can. More wide receiver news. Jaguars released Christian Kirk, who did not have the best tenure in Jacksonville, especially late when he was hurt a lot, really.
Yeah, I think the Jaguars are trying to go into a different direction with their new head coach, Liam.
The old Bucs offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen. Yeah,
yep.
That's the guy who took over.
I think he's trying to make his own wide receivers for Trevor Lawrence. So I think he didn't see Christian Kirk as one of those guys.
And then the Raiders making more noise recently as they'll for sure have a new quarterback going into next year. I think that was already a guarantee anyways, but they make it official by releasing Gardner Minshew. Yeah,
Gardner Minshew played pretty well with the Colts in his little tenure there. Thought he was good for the Raiders for a bit, but then he got injured a little bit. And the Raiders just don't see him as the starting quarterback moving forward.
Big trade for the Bears. They trade for All-Pro guard Joe Thuney from the Kansas City Chiefs. Just a 4th-round pick, by the way.
I think this was a very good trade for the Bears. You're getting an all-star guard, and the Bears needed an offensive line, as we saw last year. Their offensive line was terrible. I mean, they made a couple moves already to rebuild that offensive line. I'm thinking, what is his name for the coach? Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson, yeah.
Is trying to replicate his Lions offense because that's how his offense was able to run that well. So I'm thinking he's trying to build this offensive line so Caleb Williams has time to throw the ball.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is also going to improve the running game. I think there will be moves coming with that for the Bears as well, whether that's through the draft. Aston Gentile will certainly be a target for them at pick number 10 that they hold here in the 2025 NFL draft. I don't think DeAndre Swift is going to cut it, at least as their RB1. You could probably keep him around as like a possible backup, or maybe split carries with like a rookie running back, so you're not running Gentile out of his legs already in year 1 as a rookie. But I think improving the offensive line is going to be big because you're going to protect your franchise quarterback in Caleb Williams. Then you're also going to improve that run game. I mean, like we've seen with so many superstar quarterbacks in the NFL, like a big run or a good run game is essential. So I think Ben Johnson's doing that with the Bears. And I mean, the Lions' run game was so good with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. That was a big key to their success. So Ben Johnson very well could keep DeAndre Swift around and then draft a rookie running back, maybe even sign another one in free agency. You can never really have too much running back depth. And the Bears are certainly viewing that, and they very well could make a couple moves at that position this offseason. More news. Davante Adams got released. A couple news with wide receivers. Jets released Davante Adams as they seem to be heading in a way towards, it's tough to rebuild when you've already been so bad the last few years. But Jets released Davante Adams and the Bengals franchise tag T. Higgins.
We all expected that Davante Adams would win. There's like rumors about it. I think he's able to play on some very good teams right now for his last couple of years as a wide receiver. And I just feel bad for T. Higgins. For the second year in a row, he's got franchise tagged. But I think it just shows how important he is to the Bengals organization to keep him, but trying to figure out a new contract for him to maybe stay in the future.
Yeah, this would be an important year for Cincinnati and what they're going to do with their future. If they have a really good year, then they're probably going to pay T. Higgins and keep that trio of Burrow, Chase, Higgins around. However, if the Bengals have another disappointing year, maybe Higgins doesn't have the best year, is hurt a bit, they miss the playoffs, then I think they'd be more willing to let T. Higgins walk long term. But I mean, he was so big for them towards the end of the year that the Bengals are definitely viewing it as, okay, we need to keep this guy around to keep, because I mean, Higgins and Chase just complement each other so well, and Chase had such a good year from start to finish, as did Joe Burrow. So if they can get a healthy year from T. Higgins, certainly Higgins hoping that, because he can cash in for a bigger payday next offseason, whether that's from the Bengals or somebody else. But then, as for the sake of the team, the Bengals will have a better year with T. Higgins healthy next year. A few more things to talk about. Eagles released their top cornerback in Darius Slay, who's not getting any younger, but still one of the elite corners in the NFL.
Yeah, this is the second year in a row that the Eagles have released Darius Slay. We were talking a little bit earlier, thinking that the Vikings should go for Darius Slay.
I mean, why not? They don't really have any corners right now. Byron Murphy Jr. is a free agent. Vikings want to bring him back, but will Byron Murphy Jr. ask for too much money, or ask for too many years on a contract? Stephon Gilmore's like 35 years old. He's probably going to retire. If he doesn't, I don't think the Vikings will bring him back anyways. Kind of started to regress towards the end of that season. You could kind of see the age kicking into him a little bit. But the Vikings do need help at corner, and they need help at safety, need help at defensive tackle, and I think they've been active in willing to say, hey, we're definitely looking at upgrading these positions. But I think at this point you're going to trust Brian Flores and his scheme and what he wants to run, because it's worked the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So if Brian Flores views Darius Slay as a scheme fit, then great. If he doesn't, then okay, you can look a different direction. But Darius Slay's been so talented in his time in the NFL that it feels like you can find a way to make him contribute and be a really good player. Deebo Samuel, a couple days ago, got traded from the Niners to the Washington Commanders, an up-and-coming offense in the NFL. Made the NFC Championship game this past season. Deebo will slot in as that wide receiver 2, working with Jaden Daniels behind Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, this will be an interesting one. I mean, the Commanders get a wide receiver 2. So it'll be interesting to see how well he plays on this team. He wasn't playing that well last year. No. Had a couple drops.
Was injured too.
Yeah, but I think the more interesting thing is what are the 49ers going to do? Because there's rumors, or there's like Ayuk's trades are getting explored.
And Ayuk had a season-ending injury last year, and didn't play well at that whole contract dispute. I mean, the 49ers, you're going to have to pay Brock Purdy soon, who I think is good, but probably won't be worth the money that he's going to get. Christian McCaffrey's not getting any younger. George Kittle is still a solid tight end, and I think will be a big contributor for them for years to come. But what are they going to do at receiver? I don't know. If they trade Ayuk, I mean, you're going to have to sign or draft somebody. Ricky Pearsall, I think they're high on. But they could be a little weak at wide receiver. I mean, is there a world where the Niners, who looked just over a year ago, looked like the next, maybe not, I don't know, want to say dynasty, but they looked like they could have very well won a couple Super Bowls in a short amount of time, and now I don't even know if they're going to win a one. We'll see, though. There's still a lot of offseason to go, but Deebo getting traded to the Commanders is kind of how things are starting out for San Fran here this offseason. Last thing we'll talk about, Sam Darnold officially not getting the franchise tag from Minnesota.
Yeah, I think this is probably the right thing for the Vikings to do. You know, keep that money, try to build off the players that they're losing. And then, of course, with Sam Darnold, you know, he's going to be asking for a good amount of money. You know, he didn't play that well in the final 2-week stretch, but I do think he could be a starting quarterback somewhere that needs a quarterback right now, and be that veteran leadership if they decide to draft a quarterback like the Giants and Titans probably will do this year.
Well, it does help Darnold that the quarterback draft class is not very strong this year. You've got some guys towards the top like Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders that might be picked in the top half of the first round. Ward will probably be a top 5 pick, but even though those two are viewed as the top 2 prospects, none of them are participating at the combine. And that's especially a problem for Sanders, because Sanders has not really been impressing organizations really at all while being interviewed. I think a lot of teams are concerned about his ego and how he's famous. He's been famous really his whole life, just being Deion Sanders' kid, and that they don't view that he's necessarily as good of a leader as he could be, and that teams might be will be a little shied away from picking him with a high pick in the first round. And I think Darnold is probably the top free agent quarterback in this year's class. So barring like some shocking trades, I mean, there's not going to be much much going as far as like the quarterback carousel coming up this offseason. Anything else from you on Sam Darnold not getting franchise tagged and what that means for Minnesota?
No, I do think it was the right move for the Vikings. Like I said earlier, that they need this money to re-sign players, upgrade on, and get depth for cornerback and especially defense.
Free agency starts in the next couple of days for NFL. The draft will be about 6-7 weeks away, so some more NFL coverage coming up for you guys as the weeks continue. No show next week for us. It'll be spring break, and then the week after, we'll hopefully be previewing some Jackrabbit basketball games in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and then maybe do a little recap of the Summit League tournament as well. But March Madness, it's a fun time of year. Looking forward to watching a bunch of games, first and second round, and throughout the championship games as well this year. So that'll do it for this week's show. And Austin Senger, Brent Bowen saying so long. We'll see you again in a couple weeks.